Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a sword list. This is definitely not a budget sword, that's why it's called cheapish, as if it was cheap, but not quite there, because of course sword has become quite expensive overall for a deck, as most people are running a lot of legendaries for them, which is no surprise. The only thing I'm disappointed about not having in this deck is the new Omen legendary for sword, as it was basically the only thing I'm mainly missing to build a competent sword deck, or a little more competent. So this is definitely unoptimized, but still a fair bit of fun and works to a more aggressive stance, which is always nice. It also could say, I guess, mid-range-ish, as most of the top end is very mid-range, while a lot of the early stuff is quite aggressive. So we're going to get right into it and check it out. So our first game here is against the dreaded Dark Feast Bat. The best way to play against this deck, with this one in particular, is to just be as aggressive as possible and stop your opponent from really taking advantage of anything on their board, which honestly can be done fairly easily with this deck. You really don't have to do too much to really limit what your opponent is able to play and deal damage to you with. Of course, a perfect curve blood is really hard to deal with, and that's going to be pretty unavoidable, but something like Usurping Spineblade does a nice job at mitigating any kind of high roll. So I go for the aggression first, of course, with a 2-1, just because throwing that down was the best bet that I'd probably have it surviving. Of course, seeing that 1-drop there, I had to deal with that as well. I couldn't afford to leave that up and let them get the extra ping effect, so that was an immediate kill, and really just flooding board as quickly as I can to put pressure down against our opponent. They are going for their Pure-Hearted Singer, so it looks like they are definitely desperate for some draws, or they're just looking for something they can use to their advantage. So I just decided to go for the more floody type effects and just kind of stack our board up a little bit. That does not make things easy though, as Vera is going to be an absolute nightmare to actually deal with. Probably actually foregoing dealing with Vera completely next turn, as it's probably the best option I've got available to me. Especially after seeing this Bloodkin play. So we don't really have a decent way to do much now, which is fairly disappointing. It would have been nice if I had probably went for Apostle of Usurping instead of this frontline Cavalier, but I felt like I wanted to save Usurping until I could really take advantage of its ping effect, which will probably get us an extra pickup on the board. So it was really just a, do I play this now or do I play it later situation. We also do fairly well on turn 8, with both Chromatic Duel and Dragonites are going to be really solid cards if we manage to get that far. But like I said, all I could really do was put down aggression and hope that they couldn't hit face, try and mitigate as much of that possible damage as I could, while putting down as many threats as possible, as it was definitely going to be the best option I had available.
Everything in its proper pocket.
So there really wasn't a lot more that I could do here, as it was just going to be a pretty big pain, so all I could really do was drop what I could, hit what I could, and go face, trying to make sure they didn't have what they'd need by turn 7. They are going to pretty much wipe this out though, but Dark Feast Bat on its own definitely won't be enough to deal with this, as there's no way they've dealt 20 plus damage to their face by turn 7, and most Dark Feast Bats can't. Dealing over 20 damage by turn 7 is fairly difficult without sacrificing almost all your own health, even in a good situation. So I mainly just go for a little bit of board pressure. We've got a nice Dragonite set up as well, so there's no reason not to use that. Omen of Lust and a Razorry. Razorry is going to pretty much open up lethal for us, which is pretty great honestly, especially with this Evil Eye Demon. As our dragons are just going to kill this. Dragonite's just going to absolutely slam the board. I did play Chromatic Duel first, just because I knew I'd get it back. I wanted to get it out. But 4 damage to face, killing blood pretty much perfectly for what we needed. So next up is Forest, what most people are considering probably one of the weaker classes in this expansion. It definitely still has a spot. At least in the last few days that I've been playing Shadowverse, I fought quite a few Forest decks. Not all good, not all bad. It's kind of a mixed bag, so I'm just not really sure where they're going to lean towards in the end, as I think Forest has some potential to at least have a spot in the meta, especially if Blood gets nerfed, which most likely will probably be the case at this point, as it seems to be dominating a little too hard in both formats. Do I want to see that nerfed? A little bit, but not the way a lot of people want. A lot of people want super hard nerfs against it. I'd rather just some soft hits here and there that really don't limit it too much. So all we can really do is do our best to secure this. This is going to probably be a longer game, as Forest does put out quite a few threats pretty cheap and easily. All we can really do is go faced as consistently as possible. The one bonus to being in rotation now is we don't have to deal with brambles, which is great. We also don't have to deal with roach, which is another great thing. So forest is a lot easier matchup than it definitely used to be, especially for classes like this that are running cards that can really take advantage of buffs. So Servant of Usurpation, if you get it out early, is really good against forest because fairies can't actually kill them on their own without an evo point or another card to support them, which is amazing. Gilded Goblet does a wonderful job at keeping it alive, and if you've got some luck drawing the loot cards, or gilded cards, however you want to call them, you can do pretty well. So even in a situation like this, with Cora, while that would normally be pretty dangerous, having it pretty much be removed for free at this point is pretty nice. So I did go for the Spadal Spellbomb. I wanted to hold on to my gilded cards for the Apostle, and really take advantage of that. I do wish I did have the Usurping Omen. I think that would have been a wonderful card to use. It's just a pity that it's one of the few legendaries I didn't get any of, and I don't currently have the vials and stuff to craft it, otherwise I definitely would. As I mentioned, this is definitely not optimal. There's certainly more optimal variants you could probably go with, and honestly I would recommend that. So we get a nice little bit of damage to face. I would have liked to have wiped the board, so it was an unlucky ping, but beggars can't be choosers at this point. If I had have maybe went for Gilded Blade instead, I probably could have wiped this board out, but I didn't want to take the chance of missing all my shots. So they went for a nice field play. They're definitely going to stack this board pretty hard against us. My best option was Cullen, just kind of clearing this out for free. And then probably just a Gilded Blade to limit what the 1-drops can do so that they really don't have much of a board to use. Yggdrasil, definitely a problem. Having any kind of healing is going to be difficult for us to deal with. So it's definitely something we want to deal with quick, and luckily this is where something like Latham would have come in handy. Instead I did decide to go for the Rapier Master, although with the Evo, or sorry, without the Evo, it wasn't going to be a problem because it did have Bane. So I guess holding on to Honourable Knight is going to be a okay play overall. Couple of Blessing of Creation, okay, and Mark of Unkilling, great. What a nightmare of a card to deal with. At least we're not having too much trouble now, and from here on out we can pretty much just go into a more control-y style of deck. Really using some of our big hitters, which is going to be a little bit more fun, while also getting in as much damage as we can to face. And since we don't have much to use these loot cards on, I'm definitely going to hold off. Which isn't exactly a bad option to take in a situation like this. And Disciple of Unkilling. Not really a problem, as it is a temporary effect, not a permanent effect. Just kind of a little irritation having to deal with it. And we did have the Chromatic Duel. I was tempted to go for Black Queen. I probably should have, honestly. It would have protected our board a little bit better, but Honourable Knight seemed like a decent time to get it out and was going to have a really nice stat line. So even if we lose this, worst case, I can kind of just back up with my queens and slam the board pretty hard and make it difficult for them to be removed. But ends up with the concede picked up there, which is always a nice way to end the game. So I know some of you guys want to see a more optimal Sword deck. Unfortunately, because Sword has become so heavy on legendaries, and even some of the variants that aren't, I just don't have the new legendary for. I was a little disappointed, but I made the best of a bad situation, put together a deck that I feel is competent enough to hold its own, even in the current meta, even against something like Blood, which is being quite oppressive, and that seems to be completely fine. So if you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. You will find this deck list in the description below, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.